What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. And hang on a second. Boy, we're all having audio problems here today. Welcome to our show. It is Monday, March 27th, 2017, almost into the month of April here. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I don't know how many phone calls I'm going to be able to take. But we're just going to have to deal with that. Now then, let's get over to this surveillance situation here, because I'm looking at all these articles coming on out about the surveillance on the American people, all of it a violation of the Fourth Amendment, the surveillance that was going on under the Obama administration, not just against Donald Trump, but against all kinds of leading politicians, judges, corporate CEOs. And there's William Binney, he's come on out in Tucker Carlson's show, saying they're like the Praetorian Guard. And he's saying the NSA has targeted Congress, the Supreme Court, and Donald Trump. And they're just obviously out there completely out of control with all of this stuff going on. And former CIA officer Colonel Tony Shaffer is saying this is 10 times worse than what Watergate was. Now, we're hearing that Comey and Rogers were supposed to testify before the Intelligence Committee in closed session. They have now withdrawn. They're just not going to show up. And Chuck Schumer is now out there demanding that Nunes step down as chairman of the Intelligence Committee. These are all panic reactions. These are all telegraphing the fact that they're all pulling together to hide some really horrible secret from you, the American people. Meanwhile, over on the other side, the evidence that the Russians hacked the Democratic National Committee emails is collapsing. First of all, a lot of people are saying it was an internal leak. Could have been Seth Rich, who was gunned down under strange circumstances shortly thereafter. Could have been these 4 IT workers who were inside the Congress, who were sacked for accessing computers they were not supposed to, including that of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the head of the DNC at the time, who had access to all those emails. But no, it's Russia, 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 and they're basing this all entirely on the claims made by this group hired by the Democratic National Committee, CloudStrike. And cyber experts are saying their methodology is flawed. It's basically a self-fulfilling delusion, and it ignores the CIA's Project Umbrage, which is a program set up to carry out cyber crimes and frame third parties for them. Meanwhile, of course, the Democrats are absolutely accepting Russia's interference as on faith. We believe, don't confuse us with the facts and the evidence. We believe Russia interfered, and that's an act of war. We have got to do something about that. Okay, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Watch your head climbing into that transport plane. So a lot of chaos going on right now. There is a big, deep, dark secret. It is coming out faster than I thought it might, but it's coming on out. They're not going to be able to keep this under control because everybody watching what's going on, the defiance by the FBI and the NSA toward Congress, Schumer out there as a hatchet man trying to chop away at those people trying to conduct an honest investigation, it just screams, cover up, cover up, cover up. We live in an age of lies. Or as Mark Twain used to put it, truth has become so valuable the government is economizing it. I think we're at the point right now where the government doesn't dare tell the truth even once out of fear we might learn how to tell the difference, and that would be the end of them all. Now, getting on over to London, everybody's trying to make hay off this attack on Parliament. The British police have made yet another arrest, undermining the idea that this is some kind of a lone wolf who was inspired by ISIS. And the propaganda is already piling out on this over at the Mirrors in Great Britain. They're talking about secret text messages that ordered the lone wolf to carry out the London terror attack. And they're talking about text messages that had an image of an ISIS fighter dressed like Jihadi John, wielding a sword in front of Big Ben. Now, first of all, I have to wonder how the Mirror got into somebody's private text communications. And second, anybody who puts out a message that looks like that wants them to be found. Real terrorists are going to send out messages like, I'm having car troubles. And that's a code phrase everybody's agreed to ahead of time. When you have images that are that dramatic and that publicly damning, they're intended to be found. It's more propaganda coming on out. Now, according to a story that's over in the Daily Mail, ISIS is using the Westminster terror attack to recruit extremists with a new wave of YouTube videos glorifying the massacre. Oh, YouTube is just flooded with all these terrorist videos. I have a question about that. We keep hearing how YouTube is taking down videos for failing their community standards, for copyright violations, yet for some reason the terrorist videos are being left alone. It strikes me as a rather odd little behavior on the part of YouTube. We're going to take a second to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about the London terror attacks, we're talking about Obamagate, we're talking about all this stuff is just frothing around. Now, apparently Britain, in response to the Westminster attack, is putting up barricades and deploying SAS troops to the street permanently. So there's going to be this ring of steel and all these soldiers standing around. It's going to look like the closing scenes of V for Vendetta, and none of which is going to work because it's all for show. Now, we've been talking in recent weeks about the turmoil going on in Macedonia, where there are all these uprisings and riots, all of which track back to various non-governmental organizations run by George Soros, who is pushing for globalism. And Macedonia is now shutting all of these down. They're pushing as really hard as they can to basically get rid of these agents provocateurs. And the fact that this is all about the globalists has now been underscored because apparently Brussels has approached the leader of Macedonia's opposition party, saying that as soon as they can seize power in Macedonia, they will open the negotiations to merge with the European Union. So that's what's really going on here. Now, the annual APAC conference in Washington, D.C. is starting up, and it was met with major protests by people who are sick and tired of a foreign government directing the U.S. government on how to plunder us and spend the blood of our children in foreign wars. And what was really rather amazing and very reassuring is that a lot of American Jews are in these anti-APAC protests as well. And they're basically saying that Israel's behavior represents a threat to all of the world's Jewish people. And they are absolutely right, because Israel has gone out of its way to blur Israel's political agenda with the world's Jewish people. Israel likes to claim that they exist to protect the world's Jewish people, and anytime you criticize the actions of the government of Israel, you are blaming the Israeli people, or rather the Jewish people as a whole, and the Jewish people are getting very nervous because they can see there's a backlash coming to the apartheid government, and they don't want the government of Israel setting them up as bullet stoppers, which is exactly what the government of Israel is doing. Don't hate us. We speak for the Jewish people. It's their fault. And so the American Jewish community is finally standing up. They've decided to ignore that religious prohibition about criticizing other Jews, and they're saying, this is not working. And they were out there at the forefront of that protest against AIPAC. Good for them. Now, as you know, George Soros was trying to play his little games over in Russia. Putin shut down USAID, shut down the Soros NGOs. There is still turmoil over there, and Russia arrested a group of people who were trying to basically fan up riots. And the U.S. State Department is now saying Russia needs to free these peaceful protesters. They were just peaceful protesters protesting against the corruption of Vladimir Putin. And they're not going to get anywhere with that, because we all understand these so-called peaceful protesters are hired agent provocateurs out to destabilize the Russian government and bring it down, like we've seen the U.S. do in all these other countries. Now, as you know, a lot of people have been very concerned about the continued insertion of U.S. forces on the ground in Syria. And apparently now the U.S. forces are blocking the road to Raqqa. And what it looks like they're getting ready to do is to partition Syria by military force and break off that chunk that they want to be part of the eventual Kurdistan. And obviously Russia's not on board with this. The Syrian government is absolutely opposed to it. But this is the U.S. foreign policy. We're going to take all those nations in the Middle East that might eventually pose a headache for Israel, and we're going to break them into little tiny pieces that are easy to bully and easy to push around, and Israel will be happy. And if Israel's happy, then they give us more campaign money, and we are happy. Makes it really simple. Now, as you know, starting last week, there was a building altercation where Israel flew into Syria without the permission of the Syrian government, needless to say, bombed Syrian forces to protect ISIS, and the Syrian forces fired on the Israeli planes. Syria is still saying they shot one of them down and damaged another. Israel is saying, absolutely not. It didn't happen. But you American taxpayers, you need to send us over a couple more planes right now. And Israel's attitude is, how dare you shoot at us when we bomb your country? What's wrong with you? You must all be dirty, filthy, Jew-hating anti-Semites who want Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens. And Russia came on in and said, Israel is no longer to violate Turkish airspace, and punctuated it with a cruise missile strike onto the very forces Israel was trying to protect. Netanyahu came on back and said, we're going to bomb any place, anywhere we want, you can't stop us, and we're not even acknowledging we got the message from Putin that we're supposed to stop. Well, now it's up again. Syria is saying if Israel violates Syrian airspace again, Syria will launch Scud missile strikes into Israel itself. And then World War III will be off and running for real. Now, on the same day that all of the world's corporate media were pouring out all their sympathy for the victims of the London terror attack, the U.S. government finally got around to admitting that they killed 200 civilians in a Mosul airstrike. They bombed a building where these people were trying to shelter from the U.S. airstrike, and they killed a whole bunch of them. But, you know, and you pay, you know, feel sorry for the people in London. The people in Mosul, you don't want to care about them. That's the message we're getting from the corporate media. U.S. is sending more troops to Mosul in the latest escalation. I wish they'd send food and generators, because right now there are 400,000 civilians trapped in Mosul with no food and no electricity, according to the United Nations. When the history of World War III is written, we already know who's going to be seen as the aggressor and the villain. Now, I'm sure the United States is convinced that they will write the future history books, just like they wrote the history books following big mistake number 1 and big mistake number 2. But that doesn't work anymore in the age of the Internet. We, the people, write our own history. And we trust our own history a heck of a lot better than the packaged propaganda we get from the corporate media, the state-controlled schools, or the government itself, because it has been shown time and time again to be a passel of lies. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Lusitania not smuggling weapons to Great Britain, Pearl Harbor a surprise, Saddam's nukes, Assad's sarin gas. How many more times are you going to have to be lied to before you understand this government controls you through lies, fraud, and deception? Now, getting on back to the coming Kurdistan, which is the U.S. agenda, Kurdish forces have entered the Tapka air base west of Syria's Raqqa. Syrian forces were not present. Turkey is now digging in their heels and saying they will not participate in any military actions in either Syria or Iraq where Kurds are involved. So this is getting out of control. Meanwhile, down in Yemen, Defense Secretary James Mattis is said to be pushing for the White House to remove all restrictions placed during the waning months of the Obama administration on U.S. military support for the Saudi invasion of Yemen, including direct U.S. involvement in fighting the people of Yemen. And all the people of Yemen want is control of their own country. That's all they want. Yemen was overthrown, a puppet ruler was put in, the people of Yemen kicked the puppet ruler out, and that has led to the current situation because nobody's allowed to escape the American galactic empire. The Saudis have imposed a blockade. Famine is now a reality in Yemen, and worse things. Now, there are huge rallies all over the world now against the Saudi-led airstrikes into Yemen. Huge protest in Sana'a, one in Great Britain. And things are about to get a lot worse in terms of the public relations disaster that is being unleashed by this war. Now, back in 2015, the Pentagon made an announcement that depleted uranium munitions were not and would not be used by a U.S. aircraft in the conflict against Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And it turns out that was another promise made by the U.S. that they did not keep. Because today, the Pentagon is confirming it is using depleted uranium munitions in Syria, and it's providing depleted uranium munitions to Saudi Arabia to use in Yemen. There are videos now showing the Saudi coalition using depleted uranium and chemical weapons in Yemen. Where are all these international organizations? Where's the United Nations? Where are all these so-called humanitarian activists? Oh, they're all up in London, feeling bad about the terror attack and drinking a lot of beer over there at the pubs. And we are seeing in Yemen a repeat of the tragedy that we saw in Iraq from the use of depleted uranium weapons. There's been a major increase, a surge in infant deformities caused by the depleted uranium. We saw the same thing in Iraq. We saw the same thing up in Afghanistan. And here's where it gets really cruel. It isn't just the people who are being hit by these munitions who are suffering this. U.S. veterans exposed to these weapons come home, start families. There's an epidemic of severe birth defects among our veterans. What a horrible thing to do to those who serve the nation, who put on that uniform. And that's something else they're trying to keep quiet, even from other military. You remember how the government reacted with Gulf War syndrome? Oh, you're imagining it. It's nothing. It's just you. There's nothing. Don't talk to any other military. If you mention this to anybody, we're going to cut off the support payments. Now, the U.S. justifies the use of depleted uranium because it's armor-piercing. Unfortunately, where they're using it isn't armored. They're using it against these civilian locations with brick and wood, and they don't need depleted uranium. It's just a way of taking our radioactive waste problem and making it somebody else's radioactive waste problem. And it's big business, because right now the U.S. is selling depleted uranium munitions to Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Greece, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Spain, Turkey, the United Kingdom, Australia, Egypt, Israel, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan that we know of. Now, have you ever been to the zoo and see the monkeys flinging their poo? It's a common behavior in apes, and we see it in humans, like when the Israeli settlements intentionally dump their raw sewage onto neighboring Palestinian farmlands. Well, depleted uranium is just the high-tech version of this same monkey behavior. We're going to fling our radioactive poo onto you as an expression of our dislike. And that's exactly what it is. And the problem with depleted uranium, it is the gift that keeps on giving. Those people will be suffering the effects of this for generation after generation after generation, because depleted uranium has a half-life of 4.5 billion, with a B, years. The U.S. is turning large sections of the planet into areas of radioactive wasteland with this policy. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to talk about the economic news now, and triggered in part by Janet Yellen's raising of the rate recently. We're seeing the dollar go into a decline, as was expected. Everybody was saying, why raise the rates now when all the indicators were saying not to? Well, because it's a political turf war. Who cares about the economy? We just have to get Trump. And what we're seeing between Yellen and all of this infighting in Congress is a totally dysfunctional government. They are so absorbed with preserving their own self-interest, with scoring points, with sneering at each other. They can't operate as a government anymore. They can't function. If somebody were to attack the United States right now, they'd just walk on in, because our government is incapable of functioning as a government any longer. Now, getting back to Yellen and her rate increase, the dollar collapse is continuing, and right now, over 80% of all the post-Trump gains have now vanished. The trend is not my friend. It's heading on down. An even more alarming article came out of Zero Hedge, expressing concern that right now the yield curve is flatter than before the election, rates are collapsing, reform was the last hope for the bank bulls, but nobody's talking reform. Nobody's allowing reform. They like the system just the way it is because it sucks money out of your pocket and puts it in their pockets, and they don't want that to change one bit, even if it means the entire system crashing down at some point in the near future. Because they're money junkies, and like any other addict, they can't see anything beyond their immediate addiction. Now we're looking at growing problems with the subprime auto loans. You thought they would have learned their lesson with the subprime mortgages back in 2008, but no, of course not. Why? Because they didn't feel the pain. You did. When the banks ginned up that mortgage-backed security fraud and made a huge amount of money, and then the fraud collapsed, who got to pay for it? You did. With TARP and bailouts, QE, QE2, QE3, QE4, QE12, QE11, because in fascism, those who make money are allowed to keep it, and those who lose money are allowed to drop that onto the ordinary population, and that is where we are right now. So, having learned nothing from subprime home loans, they've been trying to buoy up the auto market with subprime auto loans. And they're now becoming a problem. That's a bubble that's about to be burst. There's only one way to have a working, healthy economy, and that is that the wealth has to be recycled from the top back down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries so that workers can trade their labor for those wages and salaries and then pump that money back into the economy through the shopping malls, through the car dealerships, through the restaurants, through the movie theaters. That's what keeps an economy healthy and moving along. Under fascism, that recycling mechanism is taken out. And all the money is up there at the very top. And nobody has any cash left down here. And that's why everybody is hurting. And instead of correcting that imbalance, correcting the wealth inequality, they're out there offering more loans and subprime loans and more credit and more debt. That's their solution to everything. Okay. Right now, subprime auto loans are crushed worse than in 2009. And last week when Claire and I had our car stolen and then returned, thankfully, we did obviously take a look at car prices around us, and they're amazing. If people actually had money, they would be buying stuff right now. The deals are amazing. We were down at the shopping mall the other day, 50% off of everything. This is inside one of those iconic retailers that's about to go belly up, 50% off of everything. Everybody had their hands in the pocket. All the sales and all the discounts and all the lead-ons and everything are not going to work if the people are not allowed to have enough money to actually buy those goods. That's just common sense, which seems to be absent inside the Beltway. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Let's take a couple of phone calls here. Nathan in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Michael?
I hear you fine.
Okay. Yippee skippy. I'm on YouTube right now, and I'm looking at a video. London terrorist drives across Westminster Bridge on path of destruction. So I I've got the thing on full screen, and unfortunately, I loaned my electron microscope to my neighbor and broke it. So I got to go to court to get him on a payment plan. So I've got a 4-inch magnifying glass, and I've got the car stopped halfway across the bridge. And I'm looking at the, people that are, about ready to die or get seriously injured. I don't see anybody, on the bridge. I see one person. And there's a couple of spots where people are disappearing before the car gets there. And then this other video shows the woman jumping off the bridge and the splash occurring before she hits the water.
Well, could you send me the URL for that video?
Huh?
Can you send me the URL for that video? And I'll take a look.
Yeah, take a look at it. And, there's all kinds of mistakes with this event. There's a picture of 2 knives by the supposed killer, and there's no blood on the knives, and, lots and lots of other things. And I won't argue about was it real or was it a hoax, but I see a lot of flaws in carrying this stuff.
Well, like I said, you need to send it so I can take a look at it myself. I did see one picture of one of the knives, rather wicked-looking knife, that did have blood on it. The idea of whether it's faked or not, I don't want to go in there right now. Was it staged? That is certainly an open question because it certainly gave the media an opportunity to not have to look at the revelations about the Obama administration spying on the Trump campaign, and I think that may have had a lot to do with it. Anyway, Nathan, send me that information. We got to let you go. The phone lines are loading up here, and we're going to switch over to Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I got the same issue I had about 2 weeks ago. Unable to stream RBN, can't get to the website, can't even call on my landline to the network to be on the call line. And it's my internet service provider is AT&T, and I don't know if anybody else has called this problem into you. I just want to know what's going on here. I can't figure out what's going on.
Okay, can you email me your IP address? You may have gotten caught in the automatic security system because it's a little sensitive because it's trying to head off the major attacks. Email me your IP, and I'll check to make sure that you're not blocked at my server, okay? As far as RBN, I have no idea what's going on there.
Yeah, I don't either. Hey, just to let you know, there's 7 more days on Radio Shack before they close their doors, so if you're looking for some good deals, you have 7 days left.
Well, Radio Shack doesn't have anything that I want to buy anymore. They stopped doing that years ago, and the Radio Shacks that were near to where I live are already gone. So at this point, I mean, any of these stores going out of business, you're going to find some great deals. Sears is getting ready to close their doors. We're going to find good deals down there. Anyway, Steve, email me your IP. I'll make sure that you're not in the filter, and we're going to switch over to Nick in Southern California. Aloha, Nick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling to talk about the economy. Specifically, I wanted to talk about gold price. Right now, obviously, they're manipulating gold and silver. We talked about that with paper contracts.
Name one thing they're not manipulating.
My brain.
Very good.
Hopefully. So now, an interesting exercise would be to go ahead, give one of the major, gold and silver dealers a call, and tell them that you have $100 million that you want to invest, and see what the premium is on a large purchase of gold, and you will find that it's like 85% of the price, as opposed to a much smaller percentage at the smaller amounts.
That seems counterintuitive because one would think the majority of the uplift, the straddle, would be on the small purchases, 1 or 2 coins and so forth. And I would not advise anybody to call up a broker and claim to have any vast sum of money to invest, because that could be construed as fraud.
Well, yeah, I certainly wouldn't take it any farther than that, but the idea would be that that's, I've got a couple of people I spoke with, and they're saying that basically what they're doing is that would be a little bit closer to the real price of gold right now as it's physically valued. to let the smaller people make smaller purchases. It's not really going to destabilize, letting the populace at large have small amounts of physical, because that's not really going to change things in their manipulation. But to have somebody with a lot of money to go in and purchase, they're actually going to raise the premiums because they want to keep everybody essentially unprotected. And that's one thing. I also sent you an email over the weekend with regard to the Samsung. They had the WikiLeaks dump of the targeted, the targeted manufacturers of products, Samsung, iPhone, things like that, and Siemens was on the list. I don't know if you knew that already.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if that was kind of more evidence towards perhaps the malware that's put on these Siemens, the Stuxnet, and all these types of things could have actually made Siemens complicit in the whole deal. Do you think that's a stretch, or is that something to consider?
It's hard to say, because certainly the manufacturers are denying that they're involved with pre-installing spyware on their devices, but we know through the long history of the NSA, they tend to compromise these companies. As you know, at the end of World War II, Great Britain and the United States made presents of captured German Enigma machines to friendly governments around the world without telling them that Bletchley Park was now able to decode the messages that were on those machines. Well, as Enigma went out of fashion, there was a company in Europe called Crypto AG that initially came out with an updated mechanical Enigma machine and then eventually an electronic system, and there was a big stink. This was reported in the book The Puzzle Palace, where the NSA went into the owner of Crypto AG and just gave him a huge amount of money to allow a back door to be built into the system. And in the age of mechanical and now computer encryption, absent back doors, the NSA can't actually decode and break messages. We proved that with our NSA challenge. And that's why they're always trying to get everybody to use a government-approved encryption, whether it's DES, which was intentionally weakened, Clipper chip, which had your encryption key embedded in the message for their convenience. And, anything that you buy off the web or buy off the shelf at your computer store for encryption, I guarantee you it's backdoored. If you need to protect your communications, if you want to make sure NSA isn't grabbing pictures of your boyfriend or girlfriend to amuse themselves with, if you don't want them stealing your business secrets to give to their cronies like happened at the Seattle APEC, you have got to invest the time and trouble to create your own systems of encryption. And that was the whole point of my Rivero Challenges the NSA article, to show how easy it is to actually do with just a little bit of programming.
Perfect, Mike. Well, before you let me go here, I think that one thing that might help everybody understand things, I mean, nationwide, but even our listeners, would be if you were to take a few moments and kind of do the Mike Rivero condensed for the public explanation of the bond market, because I don't think people really understand what it means when China is dumping their treasuries, our treasuries, I should say. I don't think they understand when another country starts dumping our treasuries and buying the shorter yields. I think even to somebody like myself, until I looked into it, and I have an economics background, and even to me that was a little confusing. So if you did take a few minutes there, I think if everybody understood economics, there would be no such thing as socialism.
Well, I agree with you on that latter part. The bond market encompasses a lot more than just the U.S. Treasuries, but to narrow our context a little bit, basically the way they conceal the fact that the Federal Reserve is just a legalized counterfeiting outfit is for every bunch of money the Federal Reserve creates, there is a corresponding Treasury bond. Now, the Treasury bond is a promise by the U.S. government that somewhere down the road they will take money away from the American people without giving anything back for that money and give it to whoever is holding that bond, which is foreign governments, foreign banks, the Federal Reserve itself. What happens when they're taking your money and giving nothing back for it? Well, it's called slavery. The problem is that during the recent years, especially since 2008, the Treasury has been overprinting Treasury bonds the same way that the Federal Reserve has been overcreating currency. And they stopped reporting on that M3 aggregate years and years ago to try and conceal the true scale of inflation. And so most investors around the world are now understanding there is a Treasury bond bubble. The U.S. Treasury has issued more Treasury bonds than can ever actually be redeemed by the American people. There are not enough American taxpayers to make good on all those Treasury bonds, especially in an era of depressed wages and salaries. Even with all the illegal immigrants, if they were legalized and turned into workers, there are no jobs for them. So if you have massive unemployment and wages and salaries are in the basement, the government can't make good on those Treasury bonds, and that's why so many people are now dumping them as failed investments. And what the Federal Reserve is doing in a lot of cases is, again, they're creating new money out of thin air to buy up all those Treasury bonds. But it's all worthless paper, and they're just shuffling it back and forth in the hope that you won't figure out what's going on.
I wonder why Russia is buying them up and China's dumping them. That's an interesting question.
That would be an interesting question, but what Russia may be looking at is trying to use the possession of those treasuries to regain some leverage against the obvious U.S. agenda to start a new Cold War.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate everything, and I hope that my package I sent you arrives soon.
Oh, was that the one with the book in it?
Yes, sir.
That arrived just today. Quite fascinating, and thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a quick read, and you know, I'm very, very close to the author. Hopefully you have the time and the interest to read it.
Well, I've already read part of it. Please tell the author I love the book, and tell the artist I love the illustrations.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. All right, we're going to get back to the news now. Along with the subprime auto loan bubble, there is another bubble building around Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that Wall Street has gone back to their old tried and true method of creating instant wealth through the inflation of real estate prices. Because if they can run up the price of the building, then there's a gap between its appraised worth and the amount owed on its mortgage, and in that gap lies the equity, which can be siphoned off for more loans or more purposes. But it's all cute bookkeeping, because when that overinflated price of the real estate collapses, like it did in 2008, then all of the loans taken out on that equity can come due, because the securitization isn't there anymore. And now Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who are still dealing with the aftermath of the 2008 crash, have created another bubble, this time in the multifamily rental market. And as long as the Wall Street boys can play their games and nothing bad happens to them, and all of the damage they cause is transferred on to you, the American people, they're going to keep on doing what they're doing, because they're getting rich. They're getting insanely, insanely rich while driving you into poverty. And that's something you need to keep in mind. Well, apparently Donald Trump, despite Yellen's raising of the rate, is going full Keynesian, priming the pump. He's going to run up the U.S. government debt. To be very honest, from his point of view, he doesn't have any other options. In order to do anything, whether it's infrastructure improvement, building the wall, whatever, he's got to get some capital to work with. And his budget cuts are not going to cover it. Again, I think Donald Trump would be well advised to talk to Ellen Brown, who has pointed out that if Trump were to use his authority as president to issue a new U.S. government currency to fund the infrastructure projects, instead of borrowing that currency from the Federal Reserve at interest, it would cut the eventual cost of the infrastructure improvements in half. Now, Russia appears to be getting ready not only for a collapse of the U.S. dollar, but more sanctions. They're starting to set up an alternative SWIFT system. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, SWIFT is the global electronic interbank system. When you send money from one bank to another anywhere in the world, it goes through SWIFT. And that makes all of these countries and all of these banks dependent on SWIFT, and it is often used in a punitive manner. North Korea was just disconnected from the SWIFT system to cut it off from global banking. And Russia is apparently concerned that the U.S. may try that tactic on them. So they are getting ready to create an alternative, just like they've created an alternative to the Western-centric private central banks with BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperative Association, all these various other groups, the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank. They're setting up parallel systems to challenge the supremacy of the private central bankers. And that really is a big part of what these wars are about. The so-called clash of civilizations is actually a war between banking systems, between banks that serve the bankers versus banks that serve the people in the nation. Obviously, I want the latter one to win out. So let's talk about immigration and refugees. Pope Francis is now out there. He's a globalist. And he's out there wagging his finger, saying that the other countries in the EU should not leave the way Britain did. You're all going to go to the dark regions. The devils are going to get you. Don't you dare do it. And it raises the issue of how compromised Pope Francis is and whether he was installed as Pope and Pope Benny the Rat was forced out because Benny the Rat didn't want to go along with the globalist agenda. But the Pope is using the Catholic Church to push for the one world order. He's probably assuming there'll be one global religion as well. Catholicism, of course. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, down in Chateau Elan, Georgia, actually it's the name of a company, and what they did is they went ahead and fired all their illegal immigrant workers, and they are now hiring American workers to replace the fired illegal immigrants. And contrary to the propaganda from the pro-immigration people, yes, there was a huge crowd of people who showed up for these jobs. Because every time you talk about illegal immigrants displacing legal American workers, the first thing you hear is, oh, the illegal immigrants are taking jobs Americans don't want to do. That's the propaganda. And as this illustrates, yeah, there are Americans who want jobs. We have 90 million legal American citizens and legal resident citizens who are willing and able to work, who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. Don't tell me they're going to turn down the opportunity for some kind of employment. Most of these people have exhausted any kind of social support. They've gone off the end of the food stamps or the unemployment. They're just barely getting by. And so, yeah, when a company fired all their illegal immigrant workers, there were plenty of Americans ready to take those jobs. Now, apparently, German Chancellor Angela Merkel last week visited the eastern city of Halle to visit the National Academy of Science. She was met with a crowd of German protesters shouting, "Heil Merkel, Heil Merkel, Heil Merkel." Merkel is in serious, serious trouble. There is no way she can win the election for another term as chancellor. She might try and steal it. Probably is already offering Hillary Clinton's consultants lots of bucks to come on over and smooth her path back to another term in office. But it's very obvious the German people have just had it with all of this open border nonsense. The German government has again reiterated and expanded its order to the German media to not ever mention the ethnicity or origin or religion of anybody who's been arrested for rape or burglary or robbery or any other violent crime. The German government is trying to cover this problem up. Okay. I don't know if that's coming from my end or somebody else's end. Alrighty. Got a bad connector somewhere. Alrighty. I'll look at it over the station break. Now, over at the French elections, Hollande is rejecting the claim that he orchestrated media leaks to derail Fillon's campaign. And it's going back and forth. And what this is an attempt to distract the French people from the substance of the accusations against Fillon, which is that he gave his wife a fictitious job as a parliamentary aide. She got a huge salary and didn't have to do anything for it. And he did do that. That's now beyond question. And so Fillon is now out there saying, well, Hollande put this out there, how dare he? In an attempt to distract the French people from what is going on over there. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. I'm going to try and find where the noise is coming from, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about the refugees. And very interesting article that came out over the Express in Great Britain, in which they're admitting that the majority of the European people do not like the EU policies. The European Union, the people of the European Union are tired and frustrated with the direction Brussels is headed, which is Brussels wants to become the government of the entire place. They want to federalize, turn it into a single nation rather than a confederation of separate states. Same thing happened here in the United States of America. The reason it's called the United States of America was this nation was started with the individual states operating as sovereign entities. And the federal government was there as a referee and arbiter across borders and to provide for the common defense in the event of war, and that was all. And over time, Washington, D.C. has turned itself into this all-powerful central ruling body, which was never intended by the Founding Fathers. Now, as you know, we seem to be going into another period of terror attack, terror attack, terror attack. Be afraid, don't think, don't ask questions, give us your money, give us the lives of your children. We got to go to war against somebody next week. So we put a couple of flashbacks up on the website today, 2 of them from 2014, in which they're admitting U.S. government agents are directly involved in these high-profile U.S. terror plots. And we've seen the pattern over and over again. There'll be a media announcement, government foils terror plot, and then 6 months down the road, the case gets thrown out of court when it turns out that some undercover informant working for the government found some loser and talked them into wanting to commit an act of terror. It's classic entrapment. Another article that came out over in hrw.org is saying that the system is being abused and they are specifically targeting Muslims. Remember the 1993 World Trade Center bombing? It was supposed to bring down a tower. It did not, because the bombers parked the van in the wrong place. It was supposed to be right against a key load-bearing member, would have brought the whole shebang down. And they parked it in a different area, and it went off, and it caused a huge amount of damage, but the tower still stood. And then it came on out that the FBI had an informant inside this terror group. The informant asked the FBI for permission to sabotage the explosive device, and the FBI said, no, leave it alone. This was actually reported in the New York Times. They wanted the bombing to go forward. Okay. Now then, let's get into the world of hoaxes for attention, hoaxes for political gain. A story coming out of Oraz.com. Down in Texas, there was this 18-year-old woman who claimed she was kidnapped and sexually assaulted by 3 black men, and they gang raped her and all this other stuff. Her name was Brianna Harmon Talbot. And her community, Denison community, was just, oh, it's terrible, it's horrible, it's horrible. And it turned out to be a hoax. It turned out to be a hoax. Remember the Tawana Brawley hoax? That ruined people's careers before it was finally exposed as a hoax. And here's another good one. Over at Gustavus Adolphus College, the Diversity Leadership Council, along with several other social justice groups, have been exposed for planting fake racist flyers on campus. Now, they're trying to justify it saying we wanted to encourage dialogue. We wanted people to understand that there is racism. No, there wasn't. The only racism is what this Leadership Council and social justice warriors created, and it was all fake. Can anybody find a hate crime that isn't a hoax, is the question we all need to ask right now. Here's a very alarming article. Over in Las Vegas, as you know, they're having the trial for the people who were arrested over the Bundy Ranch. And this is a case clearly where the Bureau of Land Management was in the wrong and these landholders were in the right, but it's a kangaroo trial. And the court is just locked down on this. And here's where it gets bizarre. The judge is allowing the prosecution all kinds of leeway, denying the same to the defendants. One of the defendants was carrying a Constitution in the pocket, is not allowed to. In fact, the judge has gone to the extreme of telling the police in the court that anybody walking in with a Constitution, they have to surrender it and leave it outside. The Constitution is banned in this federal courthouse. Well, I'm not in the federal courthouse, but I'm certainly going to be carrying my little Constitution. This is your survival guide. These are the rules. And the judge doesn't want anybody thinking about the rules when they go after these guys who've been arrested for defending their constitutional rights. All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to take a phone call from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Mike, you know, you just mentioned about what happened with the First World Trade Center bombing.
Yep.
The man you're talking about, I believe his last name was, the guy that's he's been on various shows. He's been on Alex Jones. He's been on, I believe, on Coast to Coast. He's been in a number of other shows. There was a book also about this. This guy was a colonel, a former colonel in the Egyptian army, I believe, Army or Air Force, I'm not sure. Anyway, he loved America. He was proud to be in the United States and all that. He hated these radical terrorists. And he reported a lot of them to the FBI. And then they asked him whether he wanted to be involved in a, undercover sting operation. So what happened is he said, sure, of course. But he also was smart enough to understand when you're dealing with people like the FBI, I guess because he didn't trust his own intelligence services in Egypt, to make a record of it, and he started recording his conversations when he started realizing there was something suspicious. Otherwise, this poor guy would have probably been rounded up and probably be in a federal penitentiary somewhere, maybe in Colorado there, the Supermax.
Yes.
Dead, he had to, of course, he's in fear of his life now. I'm sure I don't know where he's living or anything like that, whether because for other terrorists, but at least they couldn't set him up like that. But nothing was ever made of it. And by the way, this guy's no axe to grind. He loves this country. He's even saying how he loves this country, loves everything about this country and everything about our Constitution and about our freedoms. And by the way, he's a Muslim himself. Okay, he admits he's still a Muslim. So just so people understand it, this is it. We actually have, I wouldn't say the entire government is evil, but we have evil individuals running parts of this government.
We definitely do, and I think a general rule of thumb is you should never trust anybody from any intelligence service. Their word is utterly worthless. They are absolutely convinced because they're wrapped in the American flag that they can do whatever they want. I have had contacts with both the FBI and the CIA, and both times I came away just utterly convinced that they were very dangerous, not to me, but to the nation itself. And we're starting to see that manifest with this intelligence community war against Donald Trump.
Remember this, too, about the FBI, and to a degree the CIA, too. FBI comes from a very bad seed. J. Edgar Mary Hoover, the cross-dresser,
yeah,
who started the FBI, he did all kinds of dirty things. And as a matter of fact, back in the 60s and 70s, he used the mafia pretty much to for strong-arm tactics to get confessions and whatever else. In including this case in Mississippi. Now, believe me, I have no love for these Klansmen that committed some of these murders and stuff in Mississippi. At the same time, you don't go and use the mafia to get confessions out of these guys. You literally hire, this was all on the History Channel. You don't hire mob hitmen or mob soldiers to get confessions out of somebody either. That's because you're opening the door for other things. You're going to do that to the Klan, you're going to do it to other people later on. And this is what and today I believe what's going on is I believe the FBI and the CIA actually recruit criminals and they sheep dip their records and they have them do things like, for instance, the murder of that, cold-blooded murder of that Chechen guy who knew probably too much about the Boston bombing. What really happened to the Boston bombing?
Yeah,
I'm
could
sure you know
could
about
be,
that.
but Hoover was playing both ends against the middle because at the same time he was using the mafia to go after some of the KKK. He came to a deal with them, saying that if they wanted to go after Dr. Martin Luther King, that any attacks on Martin Luther King or his organization would not be investigated by the FBI. And the FBI is not the only one. The CIA was very much involved with organized crime. They made a deal with organized crime trying to take Cuba back. Jack Rubenstein was a paymaster for the mob as well as working for the CIA. Of course, they sent him in to basically cowboy Lee Harvey Oswald in the basement of the Dallas police station because he was supposed to die at that Dallas movie theater, but because he was shouting, "I'm not resisting, I'm not resisting," they very well couldn't gun him down there. And that's why they had to cowboy him in the basement of the Dallas police station, because the last thing anybody wanted was for Oswald to be alive to actually answer any questions.
The thing is, Ruby looked like the poster boy for a mobster.
Yeah, he did.
You could, if you wanted somebody from Hollywood to play a part of a mobster, either Italian or Jewish mobster of the day, he was the poster boy for it. And he had all kinds of mob connections, including the fact that he ran that Dallas nightclub. You couldn't run a nightclub like that in a big city unless you had some kind of connections, underworld connections.
Yeah,
There's no doubt about it. He grew up with some of the most vicious mafia thugs known to man. And anybody, and yet you got these fools that still believe that Oswald did it alone, including a jerk like Bill O'Reilly, who who calls people whack jobs if they dispute it, and wrote that book, actually making it look like everything you know about Oswald. That's exactly how it is that he did it himself. All you got to do is look at the pictures of the Magruder, what was it, the Zapruder film.
The Zapruder film, yeah. Well, I have a whole section on John F. Kennedy, and that was the beginning of my wake-up, because I had saved everything from the Kennedy assassination when it actually happened. And then, I bought into the Warren Report. I believe what the government told me. I believe what the corporate media told me. And then when Jim Garrison came out with his trial of Clay Shaw, and it began to be obvious there was something there, I went back and I actually went through all the stuff I'd saved, and it just leapt out of the page at me, all the problems. The stage photo, trying to make it look like the magic bullet theory could work. The photo that shows Oswald on the ground at street level the moment Kennedy grabs his throat. And I was blinded by my belief in the government and the media. And that's when I just said, I refuse to believe anymore in anything. And I will look at the facts for myself, and I'll come to my own conclusions. And that is why I'm always saying I seek a world free of the chains of belief, because that really is a big part of how you're ruled. And it is such a powerful tool. That's why when you're growing up, they will bribe you to allow belief to dominate your thinking. Believe in the bunny, you're going to get chocolate eggs next month. Believe in the fat guy in the red suit, you're going to get a bicycle. And believe in this and believe in that, and you're going to get all kinds of treats. They're raising our kids to let belief override their rational mind, and that is a dangerous thing. It's probably the worst form of child abuse you can have, is to warp a kid's brain so that they let beliefs overrule rationality.
Mike, all you got to do is look at the Zapruder film and see the trajectory of that bullet and see that there's no way it could have come from 6th floor depository, which was way behind already. You could see that it comes, most likely the shooter was in a prone position. The bullet kind of rises. You can see the way Kennedy was hit in the front side of the head. Front side of the head. You can see that his brain's just blown out that way.
Okay, well, hang on a second. Zapruder was standing up on part of the monument that was there on the south side, there at the grassy knoll. And the shooters were shooting from behind the picket fence, so they were shooting from a standing position. But otherwise, you got the rest of it. Yeah, it was a standing position. And don't forget, when the House Select Committee on Assassinations finally tried to assuage America's concerns about all these assassinations that were taking place back then, and they had very little money to work with, and they looked at the Kennedy assassination, and one of the things they had was this Dallas police dictabelt, because back then the Dallas police recorded all their radio traffic on these dictabelt machines rather than a traditional tape recorder. And the dictabelt, there'd been an open microphone on one of the motorcycles at the moment of the assassination, and it captured the gunshots. And analysis of the gunshots and their echoes showed that they originated from multiple locations within Dealey Plaza. If they'd all come from the book depository, then the first impulse and the echo patterns would have matched on every single one of them. And they were able to determine there were at least 4 different locations the shots originated from. The book depository, probably the 5th floor, the grassy knoll, the Daltex building, and I forget down by the triple overpass.
Another thing on Jesse Ventura's show a few years ago.
Yeah.
An actual picture of George H.W. Bush right at the scene there. Okay.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's no question that's Bush.
Oh, and he denied being there. So did Richard Nixon, and then that came on out that he'd been there in Dallas at the time.
Well, I don't know if Richard Nixon was actually involved in that. I mean, it is possible. I think more likely LBJ might have been involved in it, because he had more to gain from it.
Well, remember, as I said before, wars and assassinations do not start from a single point. What you get is a group of people whose own personal agendas would be served by that same outcome, and that's when it's going to happen. The Federal Reserve had their own agenda for getting rid of John F. Kennedy. The Mafia had their own agenda for getting rid of Kennedy. Israel had their own agenda for getting rid of Kennedy. Richard Nixon was looking at a 24-year Kennedy dynasty in the White House before he could ever get a chance of running for the White House again. Lyndon Johnson had been made aware that Kennedy was going to dump him in the second term, and he learned that through Mary Jo Kopechne, who figured in later on as well. Very, very tight circle. The Texas oil billionaires had a reason for wanting Kennedy gone, and it just went on and on. The war hawks who wanted the war in Vietnam to continue wanted Kennedy gone.
My actual belief is the actual hitmen, whereas kind of Jerome Corsi hints at that, were probably imported either from Sicily or more likely from Corsica, and they actually did the actual hit. They were probably in the grassy knoll, or and Oswald either never even fired a shot, or he was just a complete pansy. They knew he wouldn't be able to hit Kennedy with the rifle he had, or it's hard to say. But I believe the actual hit.
The rifle was defective. The Mannlicher Carcano that was planted on Lee Harvey Oswald had a defective scope. The reason they planted that particular rifle on him, the world's worst shoulder weapon, was because following the Bay of Pigs, Castro was importing cargo ships full of those very inexpensive rifles to give to the Cuban people just in case there was a second U.S. invasion. That's why they planted that rifle on him, to try and lay a link to Cuba to get public support for a second invasion. But LBJ knew of the deal that John F. Kennedy had made with Khrushchev and knew that a new invasion of Cuba would have triggered a nuclear war. So he bought off the Pentagon by letting them go play in Vietnam and basically crafted this crazed lone nut assassin and cut off the evidentiary link to Cuba, which was a frame-up job anyway. But he gave everybody something to make them feel better about what was going on, and that was how it was all covered up. And then, of course, years later, when Richard Nixon had to step down, they got rid of Spiro T. Agnew and replaced him with Gerald Ford, who'd been on the Warren Commission and could be counted on to keep the lid on the link between the Watergate scandal and the Kennedy assassination. So, I mean, you can see how convoluted and interconnected this all gets. Anyway, listen, Mark, we're going to have to let you go. We've got to take a break for commercials. We've got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take some more phone calls. Brendan in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, what the Fukushima's going on?
I'm trying to figure it out.
Hey, listen, you got to come up with one that includes the Hegelian dialectic, the problem reaction. We provide the problem, you provide the reaction, and the CFR will provide the solution. Something of that nature.
Well, I mean, we know that's how government operates. They'll create a crisis, often out of thin air, and then offer to sell you a solution. And I think the best example of that we have right now is human-caused global warming, where they're still out there pushing that 2016 was the hottest year on record, and they're still getting snow all over the Rockies. And we've had all these really hideous winters, but they're still out there saying, oh, it's roasty toasty, and it's all your fault, and you must pay us your carbon money. That's a good example, a great example of the Hegelian dialectic at work.
Right. Hey, I'm going to fire off a few quick points. I got something for Claire. Mission High School, first public school in San Francisco to win the state championship in basketball. That's for Claire.
Okay.
I use Google
you know
Chrome
she's from San Francisco.
Yes,
yeah.
I know that.
Okay.
So a gentleman called in and mentioned that he's incurring a large cell phone bill listening to the show. I use Google Voice, and it's free. And I can listen to your show basically for free. You just gotta, give up all your personal information.
Well, see, the problem with that is it's still coming to him over his metered data service, and it is a problem. We're beginning to see ISPs and cell phone companies. They're getting rid of the unlimited plans. And they're forcing everybody to go on limited plans with just absolutely insane fees if you go over your limit by even the smallest amount. When we signed up for our current cell phone contract, Claire and I both had unlimited data on our phones. Not that we really use it all that much. We don't stream movies or anything. But when I had activated tethering so that I could use my cell phone to connect my portable computer to the Internet, I had to give up my unlimited plan.
Right. So I'm using my laptop, and I can listen to you through Google for free. I sent you the Pechenik video that we discussed the other day, and then for the heck of it, I watched it again, and it was an edited version. They cut out all the interruptions and all the misdirection, and I thought that was pretty funny. Last thing I wanted to hit was the my buddy is a painting contractor, and he's cleaned house. He's gotten rid of all the questionable immigration status folks, and he's replaced them literally with all veterans, and they're the most eager, hardworking gentlemen that he could have hoped for. So that's a good news right there.
Outstanding.
And then just one last thing hitting the immigration point. If you ever get the chance to come back to SF, you will be shocked at the number of homeless on the streets while we are providing a so-called sanctuary city and directing funds that could otherwise be spent on probably decent Americans that may be having temporary issues with drug abuse or personal problems. They're getting no support. And it's a crime to walk around and see these folks just at the end of
one thing Claire and I learned in these two programs that we're involved with here on Oahu is we lost that stereotype that people who are homeless and hungry deserve to be there because they're druggies or they're alcoholics or they're this or that. We saw young families of people with education who are just victims of our predatory economic practices, and they're stuck here in Hawaii because it's very expensive to get out of here. That's what Claire and I are dealing with. It's going to cost us $20,000, $30,000 to get back to the mainland, and so they're stuck here. But they're not the stereotype you think of when you think of the homeless. These are good people. There, but for the grace of the deity go I, and so forth. And for Claire and I, it was our Buddha on the road moment. These are ordinary people. These could easily be our neighbors, but for misfortune. And so I no longer have an assumption when I see a homeless person that they somehow did something to deserve it. They didn't do anything. It was done to them. Anyway, listen, Brendan, going to have to let you go. We got another break for commercials here, and we'll be right back with more phone calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Let's grab some more phone calls before we get back to the news. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I heard you mention the whereabouts of Obama the other day. Apparently, like, he had his vacation with Michelle in the Virgin Islands in the Caribbean, but then he left Michelle home and he flew to Oahu and then on to Tahiti in French Polynesia, where he's meeting on a yacht with Blofeld, Goldfinger, Stromberg, Kanga, and Scaramanga.
Well, I understand that Obama went down to Tahiti to write his memoirs because it's relaxing, it's tropical, it's beautiful, and there's also no extradition.
Yeah, exactly, and there's also Elliot Carver's there, the press mogul too.
Yes.
So it's the whole panoply of them.
Bruno Tattaglia, the five families, you know, Michael Corleone's down there. Could very well be, but I think certainly there's a lot of stuff going on in the shadows, and we don't know what he's up to. Tahiti itself, it's a little built up like Oahu. Frankly, if he's really on vacation and relaxing, he should head on over to Moorea because that's absolutely gorgeous.
Well, I think he's getting marching orders. He's going to come back to his new compound and head up organizing for action. He used to be organizing for America, but he's going to head up organizing for action so that they create upheaval in the streets. You know, he, Valerie Jarrett, Eric Holder, Loretta Lynch, et al., you know, with their 250 offices. We're going to have a whole bunch more troubled, protests and stuff like we saw in Huntington Beach, you know, over the weekend. And then they can create civil unrest in May so that they can blame the economic collapse in June, starting in June, on that.
Well, that may be what's going on. What I'd like to seriously find out is if George Soros is down in Tahiti at the moment, or who other of these major globalist players are down there at the same time. Obviously, they've gone a very long distance to avoid any kind of observation. You know, Tahiti, of course, is a French-speaking country, so their local journalists may or may not have that much a command of English. That was certainly my experience down there. So, but you remember when they set up the Federal Reserve, they went down to Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. They wanted that remoteness and that secrecy, and that could very easily be what's going on down in Tahiti.
Oh yeah, it's Soros's yacht that they're on, and then they go out to Stromberg's underwater sea station that comes up out of the water.
All right, let's stick with reality.
All right.
Seriously, is it Soros's yacht?
Oh, no, I have no clue.
Oh, okay,
I'm just being a jerk.
Thank you for being a jerk. We're going to let you go. All right, we're going to go over to Mike in Fort Lauderdale. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. Hey, I was just going to run piggyback on the caller about JFK. Some interesting information. I'll make it quick for you. But down here where I'm at, he's recently passed away, senior trial counsel for the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. His name is David Waxman. His best friend, no relation, last name Waxman, retired NYPD homicide detective. I'm not sure. You're a very sharp guy and very learned, but I don't know if you knew there was a parallel investigation running with the Warren Commission's federal FBI investigation. And they were, I guess, assigned, these were all local municipal homicide detectives from the major metropolitan areas, one of them, this guy being NYPD. They followed, under the direction of the Department of Justice, the investigation to see if anything was missing. Well, come to find out, these guys started realizing that the FBI was holding back a lot of information. This information could be verified by this investigator, this retired detective from NYPD, the last name Waxman, who's in South Florida, Sunrise. They used to teach this class. David Waxman, who's passed away, used to teach the class on the JFK assassination to police officers and police investigators. I guess because they're on the same side of the fence as you and I and want the right stuff to get out. The information that I remember sitting in the criminal law class that he taught was that a man by the name of Frank Sturgis,
yes,
was a CIA guy who lived in South Florida.
Yes,
was they pegged him as the guy who shot, dressed up as a motorcycle cop, and he was part of the assassination attempts.
Well, I know that Frank Sturgis and E. Howard Hunt were two. I don't know about Sturgis dressed up as a cop, but Sturgis and E. Howard Hunt were two of the three tramps who were photographed in Dealey Plaza. That's what the Democrats got, tying Nixon to the assassination, and that's why E. Howard Hunt led the break-in into the Watergate Hotel, because they needed to get those pictures back. Either the Democrats were going to use them to derail Nixon's campaign, or worse, they were going to let Nixon win his second term in office and then use them to blackmail him into doing what the Democratic leadership wanted. But that was the whole point behind the Watergate burglary. The photos surfaced again through an organization called Liberty Lobby, which published the story that Sturgis and Hunt were two of the Trumps in Dealey Plaza. Hunt sued for defamation, and he lost when Liberty Lobby found witnesses who had seen Hunt in Dealey Plaza on the day of the assassination. And, of course, he had denied being there, along with George Herbert Walker Bush and Richard Nixon and everything else. So, yeah, Sturgis is a name that's well known to researchers. Now, the reason I'm allowing us to go back in history on this is because this year there's supposed to be another release of the Kennedy documentation. Now, it may have been laundered and scrubbed and who knows what all else, but there was a law passed a while ago, the Kennedy Records Act, and later this year there is supposed to be a massive dump of declassified documents looking back there. And people are wondering, will Donald Trump just let that move forward, or will he try and intervene with it, which, of course, would definitely make him a single-term president. But if you want to talk about the decline of the American empire, it all does go back to that assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Oh, absolutely. I think you would be fascinated if you got a little more information from this retired detective Waxman. He's still around. He's in South Florida. He also mentioned that a lot of information was redacted that the FBI refused to give these local municipal homicide detectives. And they dug up through a Q&A with a FBI agent who was privy to being in the room with J. Edgar Hoover, who refused to let these agents bring anything in to document anything, but he went back and transcribed everything on pencil and yellow paper. I remember this very vividly, that J. Edgar Hoover had told these guys they had 3 months to close this investigation out, and it had to be one shooter. That they knew that it was, he led them into saying, this needs to be one shooter because that's what it is. And you are, of all people, know J. Edgar Hoover's tactics. So the guy transcribed it on paper, and it is somewhere. One of these guys has it. I do know that from this class, they showed us that the assassination attempt was pretty much organized in Miami, and these guys drove up from Miami. Some female that has something to do with Castro. I don't know what relation it was, either girlfriend or cousin. I can't recall. They had mechanical difficulties on the way to Texas. Car broke down in Louisiana, and they found a paper garage receipt, a repair slip, putting that Frank Sturgis again for paying for the repair for the car. And then they continued on to Dallas, and then there was 3 people in that car, possibly E.R. Hunt. I know they were hesitant to give the other name because the guy was still alive. But, well,
let's pull back here a little bit. We're going to bring this to an end because we're running short on time here and we've got other callers. But basically, when Kennedy was assassinated, there was no federal law regarding the killing of a president. All prior assassinations had been handled in the jurisdictions in which they occurred. Under the letter of the law, the assassination of John F. Kennedy was under the jurisdiction of the Dallas Police Department and the Texas authorities, and the Secret Service and the FBI literally grabbed the body and skedaddled out of town, and the whole purpose of the Warren Commission was to head off all other independent investigations, to grab up all the evidence, to basically shut these other investigations down and say, look, we've got it covered, we'll take care of it, and tell you what happened. And that's generally the purpose when you have a high-level federal government investigation. It's to cover something up that would be exposed by lower-level local jurisdiction investigations.
Yes. And I remember learning from you something to do with one of the members on the Warren Commission who had absolutely no business being there. He was a banker.
John J. McCloy.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. Is that not the smoking gun that everybody needs to know, that someone in the financial realm had direct ties into this?
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, wars and assassinations don't start from one cause. When you have a group of institutes or individuals or agencies whose own personal agendas are best served by this particular action, the action will happen. And it gives them all plausible deniability, because throughout the years, anytime evidence surfaced pointing toward one group, as behind the Kennedy assassination, they would leak some evidence that would lead in another direction. And people would bounce around between all these different players, assuming they're looking for a single source of the assassination and not really realizing they're seeing all of them on full display. And certainly the Federal Reserve did not like John F. Kennedy because of his Executive Order 11110, which basically put about $4.5 billion worth of currency into circulation among the American people, off of which the Federal Reserve was not able to charge interest. And that's what made Kennedy their enemy. When Kennedy was talking about secret societies, he could have very well been referring to the Federal Reserve and private central banking.
The last thing, Mike, in closing, real quickly, I remember in the class they had challenged us to have someone try to find JFK's brain tissue. Apparently all of it, the entire substance, ended up missing. Someone decided to do a little evidence eradication on that.
Yeah, that was right from inside the National Archives. Kennedy's brain disappeared.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thanks for all the work you do, sir.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over here to Ralph in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. How you doing? I'd ask a hypothetical question about the Agenda 21 and gentrification in the inner cities. Under the Trump administration, do you see a major collapse happening to these big apartment building owners that are overpricing inner cities for apartments? Do you see a collapse happening?
Well, obviously, if rental property owners are charging more rent than the people living in the area can afford, they're not going to have any renters. And what are they going to do, turn around and demand a government bailout because there aren't enough people who can afford the sky-high rents? I don't think so. As to when it's going to happen, that is really very difficult to say, because those of us out here trying to prognosticate where the economy is going are basically doing so on the basis of the existing rules, regulations, and laws that supposedly govern our economic system. On the other side, we have a financial system that is basically breaking the law, ignoring the regulations, and they're backed up by a government that simply changes the rules whenever they feel they need to keep the system going on a little bit longer. So we all know a crash is coming. Exactly when, very, very difficult to say, because, again, the rules are being changed on the fly.
Do you see them walking away from them, or the banks are just going to basically take it over from there?
Oh, well, the bankers, when the crash comes, the bankers will say, you owe us this, therefore we're going to take the real assets, the hard assets of the country, and put it in our pocket. And at the end of the crash, it's going to be the bankers are going to own everything. Every house, every factory, every store, every gas station, every school, every street, everything. They're going to own it, and then they will allow us to rent from them in basically a return to feudalism. Because that's the ultimate goal of all private central banking, a return to serfdom and feudalism.
That's all on the Agenda 21.
Well, they renamed it Agenda 30 because they're way behind schedule.
Wow, so under a Trump administration, it's going to be processed, it will take a lot longer. What's it here now?
Again, we don't know. The problem I think we're facing right now is Donald Trump got here too late. I know he would like to avoid a crash, but at this point, especially with Yellen opposed against him and raising rates to paralyze the Trump administration, I don't think Trump can actually solve the problem. I don't think he can. I'm sorry, but I don't.
Wow. So you see what the dollar crash is coming around the corner. You see that coming around the corner, and all the real mega rich or fleeing outside of the country and going to places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Switzerland.
Well, they don't need to flee.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got their nice fortified houses. What they're doing is they're sending their wealth not necessarily out of the country, but into some other store of value because that dollar is going to be eroding away. But we're going to wind up in Zimbabwe territory. We're going to be walking around the streets with paper notes in our pockets that are stamped $100 trillion. And even then, they're going to tell us everything is still fine, everything is hunky-dory. And you can ask the people of Zimbabwe how well that worked out for them. Anyway, listen, Ralph, we're running out of time.
Thank you.
Going to let you go. Tom in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, listen, this is Tom in Philly. The internet, I mean, not the internet. The cell phone services now, the plans, they're all going to unlimited plans now. I just got a reduction in my bill of $75 a month from my grandfathered in unlimited plan, and now they have new unlimited plans for AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, everybody. So everyone should check your plans, call your cell phone company and see if they've got a new plan available, which it seems like once T-Mobile and Sprint started, now AT&T and Verizon have done it also.
Well, we'll definitely look here because Claire and my contract with our current cell provider expired about 2 weeks ago, and we're getting ready to go on over. I want to get Claire off that POS Android and back onto an iPhone. The only reason we went for the Android is the bigger screen, but we're just going to get her the bigger screen iPhone because that Android has just been a horrible, horrible problem. And, of course, the Androids are much more vulnerable to malware than the iPhones. The iPhones are still vulnerable, but the statistics are showing not quite so much. So we'll definitely look and see what the plans are.
What Android does she have that's causing you so much trouble?
She has, well, it's the Android operating system itself. It's the Samsung. It's one of the Galaxy Notes. But it's just the user interface. They're trying to evade Apple's patents, and so it's not intuitive. It's really very difficult. She gets confused on it. And so do I, you know, trying to solve problems.
I went from a Note 2 to a Note 4, and that's a little different. But also, one more, and I'll let you go. If anybody is getting blocked from RBN, just get them their IP and send it to Mike, and then I'll look it up and see if they've been blocked. If you hammer, when we have that problem,
stay on the line. We got to cut you off. Stay on the line. I'll bring you back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go back to Tom in Philadelphia. Tom, you were saying that if people are being blocked, you had a recommendation. Could you repeat all of that?
Sure. Back when we were having that problem with the SSL certificate, if people were trying to get in, if they hammered the site a little too much, they got put on a block list. So if anyone can't get to RBN's website, republicbroadcasting.org, please send an email or contact you or somehow. I don't know how Mike wants to do it. Maybe Mike will update this message. Get their IP address to us, and I'll go in and see if it's on a block list.
Which block list are you looking at?
Well, RBN's website has a separate block list from the host. So even I got blocked one day when I was hammering it a little too much trying to get in.
Yeah, well, I have a similar system on my server. Obviously, I have nothing to do with security on RBN's end. I manage security on my server, and I've actually written much of that myself, and I'll agree it's not always perfect, and it will often blacklist totally innocent people, but I try and stay on top of that. But again, we're doing the best that we can in the face of cyber warriors. That's what they like to think of themselves. I like to think of them as thugs. Are constantly trying to bring our servers down because these are people who hate the First Amendment. They do not think you have a right to your own opinion or your own thoughts. They truly believe that they have some kind of a right from the imaginary playmate in the sky to decide for you what you will see, what you will read, and what you will hear. And, of course, that's a good definition of a dictatorship right there. All right, Tom, we're going to let you go. Thank you very much.
Let Mike, just have Mike and if Mike can send you a message and tell you what email address people can send a their IP address too. We'll try to check and make sure it's not on the block list. Have a good day, buddy.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines and do some news for the 3rd hour. So, Mike in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, I just wanted to announce a victory for freedom of speech here in Philadelphia. The Trump march that we had, when I could tell, the whole thing was planned to be canceled, and then they were just going to print that Antifa managed to cancel it. Yeah, so when we showed up, about equal number of Antifa and Trump people. And the Antifa people were already out on the street, and the Trump people were out, like in I don't know, the grass area. And so then the police told us that we couldn't march anymore. So they just told us that that it was canceled. We eventually just decided we're going to do it anyways. The police surrounded us, completely blocked us in for about 3 hours. Eventually, a few of us walked the block, noticed that the Antifa, the Anti-First Amendment people weren't around.
Okay, Mike, I got to put you on hold. Mike, I got to put you on hold. Mike, do not hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And we're talking with Mike in Philadelphia. And, Mike, you were going to tell us some more about what happened at the Trump March.
Yeah, so actually when we decided that we were just going to march anyways, some of the guys at the front, they spoke with the cops, and the cops said, if you decide to go, you have to roll up your flags so that you don't instigate anyone, and that they were telling us originally that we weren't allowed to march because we were going to attack them. So as far as I could tell, everything from the ground, or from the top up, was totally designed for the whole thing to be shut down. Just as far as I know, newspapers already had their stories printed that they managed to cancel it. About 2 hours of waiting, Antifa eventually totally left because they were like out in front of us the whole time. We just started marching anyways, and the police got in front of us. We marched through the most significant part of the city, yeah, because it was 70-degree weather. Yeah, all of Philly was like out on the street, so we had like the absolute maximum impact. And because I don't know, because we basically like triumphed over that, like it was supposed to be a march in the beginning, but it turned into a rally. So. Yeah, everybody was just yelling like USA, USA. Yeah, it was totally nuts. I mean, everybody was like just smiling as we went past. I mean, we had some hecklers following us, but I mean, it almost made it better. So, yeah.
Let me back up here a little bit, because the part I am really having a problem with is uniformed police of your city trying to shut down a rally in support of the elected President of the United States of America. Does that about sum it up?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, anyways, as far as we know, it's actually the mayor who did it. The police are in total support of Trump, really. I mean, like, once we got walking, they were with us the whole way.
Okay, so let's back up here again and say that this mayor ordered the shutdown of a rally in support of the elected President of the United States of America.
Yeah, and then what was on top of it is the Anti-First Amendment people. They actually didn't have a permit to even march. We were the only ones with a permit, so they should have already been keeping them off the street for us to march, but they didn't. They just plowed the way for them. So, I mean, everything about it was. And if you even look back at some of the news, you'll see that some videos were actually put out claiming that they managed to cancel it early before we actually marched. And then some other stories after we did march, they spin it in the worst possible way. Like they say that we only managed to do half our march because we were going to attack them, so they didn't let us march past halfway. Yeah, but the second half of the march that they did stop us from going to, that was actually the least significant part. It wasn't actually in the city, so to speak, in the same way.
You see, the part that the part that really concerns me here is this is normally the sort of behavior you would see if somebody was like planning a Nazi march through town or a KKK rally, but we're talking about a rally in support of the elected President of the United States of America, and you've got the mayor of the city and his cronies are trying to shut it down, aided by the corporate media. That is really a stunning development as far as I'm concerned, and it does underscore the fact that our government is breaking apart. It is so caught up in this factionalism, in this turf war, in this liberal versus Democrat, globalist versus sovereignty. They can't function any longer. There was no reason for them to deny you your First Amendment rights to peacefully assemble and express your will, especially because you had the permit and Antifa did not. And Antifa is the one that's got the record of violence in this case.
Yeah, it's like it's so obvious that it was just like a from the top operation. I guess another one of the interesting things, or I guess good things, is it seems that there's actually groups forming that are directly dealing with Antifa themselves. I read in California there's actually a group called Anti-Com. And they basically join the Trump rallies to kind of confront, so to speak, kind of help people out with Antifa.
Well, let me sum this up here. Let me sum this up here because I got to let you go and take one more phone call. Then we got news to do. Frankly, this Antifa is starting to strike me as another Black Lives Matter in that it's probably funded by George Soros and organized to the point where, I mean, how petty can you be where you're out there trying to keep the American people who support the President of the United States of America from doing so? That strikes right at the heart of that First Amendment. Even people who do not approve of Donald Trump, and there's a lot that he's doing I don't approve of, we still have a right to get out in the street and say, yeah, we support our president. And for this obvious organized effort to silence us, tells me that we're being set up for a massive media campaign that all of America hates Donald Trump. They've turned on him. His support has vanished. They're even floating this idea that somehow Donald Trump has now committed treason. And it really is reaching ridiculous levels. And again, the parallels between what we're seeing happen right now in Washington, D.C. and what we were seeing in Moscow leading up to the collapse of the former Soviet Union, the parallels are definitely there. I think we're definitely headed for a political collapse of the federal government.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like this was such like a huge thing because they did so much work to try and stop this one. I mean, like I saw that in Huntington Beach or whatever, Antifa actually attacked people. But here I think in Philly was actually the biggest victory out of it all because they really want to hold on to Philly, and I think we just majorly beat them on Saturday.
Well, it's obvious Antifa is another brown shirt organization, and we need to treat them as such. Mike, we're going to let you go. I'm going to do a quick shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're going to take one more phone call, and then we're going to do some news. SpongeBob, what's on your mind today?
Hey, yes, Dean, Mike, I'm here. It's a beautiful day in Illinois. Aloha and Feliz Lunes.
Yes, and happy Prince Kuhio Day to you, too. It's a state holiday today.
Yes, sir. I'm a little late, but you were talking about the JFK assassination, and I wonder what are your thoughts have you come across the name of James E. Files?
It rings a bell, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Please enlighten us.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, for your audience, YouTube, James E. Files. The title would be I Shot JFK.
Oh, yes, now I know who you're talking about.
I'd like you to check it out.
Yeah, now I know who you're talking about.
and maybe you could tell me what went on there. But that guy seemed to have a whole lot of information about what went on that day. I don't know what your thoughts are on there, but boy, he had the pulse on that, and he schmoozed with Jack Ruby. With he described his weapon was a Remington fireball. I couldn't get a Remington fireball today.
Yes.
But maybe you can check it out and maybe add that to your repository of JFK, and it's something you scratch your head about. He died. He gave a prison. Well, he was in prison. He did this interview, and it's you might consider it interesting. I thought I'd post that to all you Rivero Rangers. Well, he may or may not have been a shooter. He certainly was not the only one. Kennedy was being shot at from multiple locations. And I guess, being in prison already and about to die, he may have just decided to go public. We know that E. Howard Hunt made a deathbed confession about his role in what was going on there as well. Anyway, SpongeBob, thanks a lot for the info. We're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines for a little bit, and we're going to get back to doing some news here. Apparently, Israel is issuing a travel alert to their own people who are vacationing in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, saying to leave immediately because ISIS is coming to get you, or more than likely, Israel's about to launch another attack into Egypt. Now then, over in West Virginia, as you know, there's a war on homeschooling. Right now, there is a pitched battle where your children are not your children to teach. You will put them in the state-controlled schools. You will subject them to Common Core. You will allow them to be force-fed Michelle Obama's school lunch program, although that's starting to fade. But in West Virginia, they're taking it one step further. They're looking at a bill that would literally declare homeschooling to be a form of child abuse, which would allow CPS to investigate and possibly take your child away. They don't want parents teaching their children because they're concerned that the parents might be teaching their children things the government doesn't want them to know, like the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, as they were originally written. Common Core has changed the language under the excuse of making it more contemporary, but they've changed the meaning of much of it. Common Core teaches that the Second Amendment gives you the right to keep and bear arms if you're part of a government militia. That's not what the Second Amendment says. So they're literally trying to steal your children's minds away from the parents. I find that unacceptable. Now, getting into the PC circus, and we talked about this a while back, there is this problem of men who will make themselves into women through surgery and drugs. And they'll say, ta-da, I am now a woman. Well, that's not true. They are men who have been made to look like women. In their DNA, which controls things like muscle density and mass, they are still male. The problem is, under political correctness, these men who have made themselves into women are now being allowed to compete against real women in athletics, and to nobody's surprise, they're winning. They're dominating fields in weightlifting, track, wrestling, football, basketball, mixed martial arts against real biological females. And that's considered politically correct. Yes, you lost the gold medal to this guy who is a girl now and everything, but really it's politically correct. You should just accept that. I think they should be setting these people up with DNA tests. If your DNA says you're a male, you compete with the men. If your DNA says you're a female, you compete with the women. But to take a man who is biologically stronger on the average than women and make them compete with and allow them to compete with the women and dominate them, that's unfair to the real girls. It is hideously unfair. And the politically correct people are out there saying, well, you're discriminating, you're making these transgenders feel bad. I'm sorry, I'm not the one who messed them up. Let's not compound the damage by cheating these other real biological females out of their place in these sports. Maybe we need a third division for transgenders. So we'll have
male mixed martial arts and female mixed martial arts and the transgender mixed martial arts. But the current system is unfair to real biological girls. Because I'm sorry, and I know I'm going to get all kinds of hate email for this, a man who has things chopped off through surgery and things added through hormone treatments, makeup, and dressing up is still a guy in the biochemistry level. The DNA tells you what your muscles are going to be doing. I'm not surprised that these female athletes are being crushed by these transgenders. It is simply not fair at all to the real females. Some accommodation has to be made. I don't care how PC it is to say, oh yes, now they're a woman. No, they're not. They're something else. And if you want to go through that, if you're a guy and you want to go through that, fine. More power to you. If that's what's going to make you happy. But don't come on back and say, I'm now a real girl and I should be allowed to compete against the girls. That is not fair to the real girls. Because a transgender changed man is not a girl. He's a transgender changed man. And that's the reality behind the PC-ness. Now, over in California, and they are definitely going nuts out in that state. I'm ready to say, go ahead, secede. We really don't need you anymore. Democratic State Senator Scott Wiener has proposed Senate Bill 239 that will repeal the legal requirement that if you have HIV/AIDS, you are required to notify potential dates ahead of time. And he's saying these laws have not helped to spread HIV and AIDS, and it's making the people who are infected feel bad. Well, I have a lot of sympathy for people who have HIV and AIDS, because I am of the opinion it's an accidental creation of the smallpox vaccination campaigns in Africa back in the 1950s. And they are victims. But let's not compound it out of a sense of political correctness that let them go on out and spread the disease. If you go back and you study the history of the beginning of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, you will find the story of this air steward from Air Canada who was flying all over the United States of America, was infected with AIDS, was going to the bathhouses in every city his airline stopped over at, and infecting people there. He was the patient zero. And all by himself, he sparked HIV surges in all of these cities he flew to. And when they caught up with him, they said, why didn't you take any precautions or anything? He says, well, if I've got the disease and I'm going to die, I figure so much for the rest of them. There comes a point where political correctness really becomes ridiculous. It's time to get back to the real world. It's time to get back to common sense. It really is ridiculous here. It would help if the big pharmaceutical industries were actually looking for a cure for HIV and AIDS, but they're not. The big money is in treatments. You're still going to have the disease until the day you die, but every month you will go and you will buy more medicine to make you feel better. But you're still carrying the disease. You are still infectious. Now then. Story here coming out of Philly.com. It's about a company called Guaranteed Returns. Now, Guaranteed Returns was sort of a reverse brokerage depot for expired pharmaceuticals. Because when pharmaceuticals are sent out to the pharmacies, there are expiration dates. And you need to really pay close attention to those, because those are very unstable chemicals. It's not like canned fruit or canned vegetables where they're still going to be good for a year or two after the X date. With pharmaceuticals, if it's past the X date, you stop right there. They're not working anymore. So apparently, Guaranteed Returns sort of stepped in to help the pharmacies. They would go pick up the expired drugs, consolidate them, send them to the pharmacies, get the money back, and then distribute the checks to the pharmacies for the return medications. The problem was they set up a bogus front company of another pharmacy for themselves. And because none of the other clients knew the other clients, they didn't know that they were being shortchanged on their shares. And it resulted in a $180 million fraud. And it was only because there was a theft in their offices and the police investigated that they even stumbled across this. They were getting away with this thing. It was amazing. All right. Now then, we're coming up on a commercial break. When we come on back, there is a major lawsuit that may finally start to open the light on the risk of suicide with antidepressants. It's a big one. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Pardon me. We're going to go ahead and take one more phone call because it's on topic. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I saw that article about the transgendered athletic thing that you ran. And I made my daughter, I have a 14-year-old tennis-playing, scholarship-level tennis player daughter, and made her read it because she's always on telling me I'm being politically incorrect. And we talked about it, and, you know, not only is there, you know, muscular and all that, but there's also size, hip structure that makes you faster, a whole bunch of things. But I wonder how this would apply to Title IX. I'm trying to explain to my daughter that what if this were to expand and the scholarship opportunities you would have for college, you know, would be, you know, limited because there'd be guys, you know, you're competing against, or how about the people who are in the pros, like these pro MMA fighters and all that, that there's only a limited amount of endorsement deals. If they're winning all the titles, getting all the big fights, and getting the endorsements, that limits your opportunity as well. You're absolutely right that they should be. They should have their own. If they want to have their own, you know, transgendered Olympics, well, you have at it. You know.
Well,
they should compete against men.
One of the questions I keep asking about this whole issue is how many people are seriously genetically transgendered versus how many are being socialized into thinking that's going to solve the social pressures they're under. Because going back over to the question of homosexuality, there are a lot of young people who think they're gay, they're almost encouraged to be gay, and they get a little older and realize, no, we actually aren't, and they go back the other way. I remember back during the 1990s when the militant feminists were out there, and the message they were sending to women wasn't, you can, if you choose, go into the world of business. The message was, there's something wrong with you if you don't go into the world of business. That if you wanted to be a stay-at-home mother and care for your kids in the house, that there was something wrong with you. And certainly if you have a political organization that is promoting something like transgenderism, automatically you're going to be seeking to find some way to create more transgenders to swell the ranks of your supporters. And it may be an unconscious epiphenomenon, but we really do need to look in our media-saturated world. Kids growing up, they're getting all these messages about what they ought to be and what they should be, and this is fashionable and that's fashionable. And again, going back to the 1990s, women were being encouraged to have a lesbian experience. I'm wondering how many women would have done so without that encouragement from outside. And so there really is an issue. And when you throw the problem of the prescription antidepressants on top of it all, which you know, messes up your thought processes, we start to see one reason why our society has become as messed up as it is.
Mike, I've run into organizations out here, for the life of me, I can't remember the names or I would tell you, but who are giving interventions to kids as young as 8 and 9 on it's okay to be, gay. It's okay to be transgendered. And when I was told about this by the people who actually were espousing this, I said, how in the world would an 8 or 9-year-old even know what he is?
I agree.
You know?
I agree. Now, that being said, there's a fine line. I agree that we should all be accepting and tolerant of these people, but at what point do these various agencies and charities and foundations cross that line into encouraging people to think that they're gay or transgender in order to simply to secure more funding?
And at what point do they start to tolerate the way we think, and not to social engineer somebody, who maybe isn't into what they are? They complain and moan about deprogramming, which I agree, that's kind of ridiculous, but in a way, isn't this programming?
Well, this could be another way of destroying our sense of identity and self, leading to the New World Order. Anyway, Peter, going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I want to step on back to that phone call we had about the Trump rally, where the mayor of Philadelphia apparently just tried to use the police to shut down a rally in support of the elected president of the United States of America. And I got an update sent in to me to remind me that Mayor Kenney sees Philadelphia as a sanctuary city, and he's very much protesting Donald Trump as Attorney General Sessions starts to pull the plug on federal funding to these cities. And so that's what his snit was all about. And apparently in his argument over being a sanctuary city, Mayor Kenney was willing to basically deprive the citizens of his own city of their First Amendment rights, along with committing violations of Title VIII. And I really think pulling the funding from these cities is not enough. I think these officials ought to be arrested and prosecuted for the crimes they are committing, because they are committing crimes. Anybody encouraging or harboring an illegal immigrant is guilty of violating Title VIII. For each count, you can get up to 5 years in prison if you personally profit from harboring the illegal immigrant. If, in fact, they are, for example, going to vote for you in the next election, then the penalty goes up to 10 years per count. And apparently, over in Nebraska, their Democratic Party is under attack now because they've been handing out gift baskets for refugees and including voter registration forms in there. These refugees are not allowed to vote. And the Democrats, here's a gift basket, don't forget to fill out the card. Could it be any more obvious the Democrats are trying to take away your heritage and barter it to illegal immigrants and refugees for the sake of a fast vote? Because contrary to what Obama used to say about you didn't do that, contrary to the propaganda of the government, this nation, the United States of America, was built up generation after generation after generation by the American people and by legal citizens, legal residents, legal citizens, and we do that each generation to bequeath that nation to our next generation. And what the Democrats are doing, they're stealing your children's inheritance. They're taking it away from them and saying, no, 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 you don't get to inherit this nation your forebears built. We need to trade it to these people so they'll vote for us. That's what's going on here. And you should be very, very angry. Now, getting on back to science and medical news. Story coming out of Blacklisted News, there is a major lawsuit that is heading into the courts regarding the antidepressant paroxetine. And as part of the discovery on this lawsuit, it is confirmed paroxetine increases your risk of committing suicide over 800%. 8 times. If you're given this medication, you are 8 times more likely to commit suicide than if you've been left alone. And what's making this lawsuit very interesting is because it's starting to look into that gray world between the brand name products and the generics, with each side pointing to the other and saying that we don't need to issue the warning because we didn't create the drug, and it's opening up this huge exposure that there are loopholes still in the FDA and USDA rules that allow these drugs to be marketed without adequate warnings on them. And I hope this lawsuit moves forward. I hope that we finally start to address this issue. Because one of the reasons our country, our society, may be experiencing cultural insanity is we've drugged our brains to the point where they're not working properly any longer. Go over to ssristories.org and you will see documented cases of perfectly normal people who are just given these drugs, sold these drugs by their practitioner to make a fast buck, and all of a sudden they go wacko. And when they commit suicide or they commit a mass murder, it may make the news, but there are other effects. Changes of behavior. We took a chart of the per capita increase in incidence of domestic violence, and we put it over a chart of the per capita usage of these prescription psychiatric medications, and we found a strong correlation. And this stuff isn't going to make the news. Neither are road rage incidents, which are increasing, or bar fights, which are increasing. Changes in personal behavior, where men and women all of a sudden, they become wild children. They're out there at the bars picking up strangers and behaving in ways that increase the possibility of an infection of an incurable disease. There is a real problem here. We're medicating our entire population into insanity, all in the name of a fast buck. Now, something that's a little bit more alarming, over at the Organic Prepper, they're talking about a new law that was passed last December, one of the last things that Barack Obama did in office. It establishes a waiver of informed consent. Prior to that law, anytime pharmaceutical companies wanted to subject you to an experiment, they had to say, this is an experimental medication, it may do this, it could do that, do we have your permission to proceed? It's called informed consent. Well, the new law says, and here's the wording, clinical testing of investigational medical devices or drugs no longer requires the informed consent of the subjects if the testing poses no more than minimal risk to the subjects. Who gets to decide what minimal risk is? Certainly not the industry, which insists to this day that vaccines are perfectly safe, even though the package inserts on the vaccines themselves say otherwise, with sudden infant death and autism acknowledged as being consequences. We're living in a society that insists mercury in the environment is highly toxic, and if you do not deal with it properly, you can face stiff fines from the EPA. If you do not dispose of your compact fluorescent bulbs, which contain mercury vapor, properly, you can be fined. This is an antique mercury thermometer for taking your temperature. If I break it and it's not disposed of properly, that's a fine. But this same institutional system is insisting that they can pump mercury into the arms of your children and it will not have any negative effect whatsoever. This push for mandatory vaccines is all about extracting more wealth from an already impoverished American people. And they're starting to go global. Over in Sweden, they're having a vote on the 4th of May. If that measure passes, vaccinations will be forced on the entire population. Now, Sweden likes to portray itself as a modern, liberal political system. They have feminists in high positions in the government. And it's really getting weird. Apparently, Sweden's feminist leader is now saying foreign rapists of Sweden's women should not be deported. Because after all, we're going for the New World Order and the global government, and having your daughter gang raped by a bunch of refugees is a small price to pay for the New World Order and the global government and the global private central bank. It really is a mess. Forget about fall of the Soviet Union. I'm seeing fall of Rome coming up. Maybe even a new dark ages. All right, interesting little story from Global Research, a little bit of confirmation of something I've been telling you for a long, long time. The article is headlined, "A Conspiracy Theory That Became a Conspiracy Fact. The CIA, Afghanistan's poppy fields, and America's growing heroin epidemic." And this article goes into detail, telling you basically what I've been saying before. Opium production in Afghanistan broke all records in 2006, reaching historic highs. Now, the U.S. claims they're trying to eradicate opium in Afghanistan. Maybe they should have just left well enough alone, because the Taliban did eradicate opium production in Afghanistan. You need to go back and find a book and a video called "A Nation Betrayed by Bo Greitz," where he talks about how the CIA was bringing heroin in from Vietnam through right here in Hawaii to the U.S. and selling it primarily into the black communities. At the same time, the government was out there saying, we're eradicating opium production over there in Asia. The war on drugs is actually the war on the competition's drugs. Don't want anybody cutting on in, don't want competition. It might drive the profits down. Remember, we have a page at my website where we have photos of coalition soldiers, including ones wearing the U.S. flag shoulder patch, guarding and protecting the opium poppy fields and moving those bags of raw opium around. The biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country. And now Global Research has come out with their confirmation about that. I mean, it's an open secret. Almost everybody knows about this. Mel Gibson actually made a movie about this called Air America, based on the CIA's proprietary airline in Vietnam. It was called Air America, and along with their other duties, they were flying the opium out of Kun Sa's plantation down to be loaded into primarily the body bags of our Vietnam dead and sent back to the United States. In fact, I remember back in the 60s, it was sort of floating around that the heroin for sale on the streets smelled of formaldehyde. It's really out of control. No wonder they hate Donald Trump. If he ever began to suspect what the CIA has been doing for the last 50 years, he would do what Kennedy promised to do. That's why they're all aligned against him. It's one big, giant, corrupt drug cartel. And they think that's just fine. They think that's just fine and dandy. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, 2 new storm systems are coming into Utah and western Colorado. They're expecting snows all over the mountains yet again. But still, the corporate media and the carbon Nazis are out there screaming, 2016 is the hottest year on record. And if you go into any websites that are pushing this story and you try and post a rebuttal, the carbon Nazis are going to jump all over you. And by the way, I've actually been banned now from a couple of these websites that are posting this, you know, warmest year on record. Now go in with a rebuttal, and then a whole bunch of people come in and launch personal attacks against me. Oh, you must be working for the Koch brothers and so forth. And they go back in to rebut, and I'm banned from posting. It's very easy to win a debate when you lock out the other side. But that's how they like to play. Now, Al Gore is out there saying that global warming is what caused Brexit. Global warming caused the Syrian civil war. No, Al, the abuses of Brussels caused Brexit. And the effort by the United States to replace Assad's government with a ruling junta caused the Syrian civil war. But nice try. Chelsea Clinton, who's out there trying to attract as much attention as she can ahead of a political run, is out there wondering if global warming is the cause of diabetes. Of course, right now, Chelsea Clinton is not doing very well. Somebody put up a photo of the engraved picture of Abraham Lincoln from the $5 bill with the Make America Great hat on it, and Chelsea Clinton came back and said, please somebody tell me this is photoshopped. And everybody came on out and said, oh, no, that's absolutely the hat he wore when he was delivering the Gettysburg Address. So already we know that this lady is totally brainless. She's just another manufactured puppet ruler for the ultra-rich. Now, getting on back to global warming and ClimateGate and the leaked emails and NOAA constantly being caught cooking the books on this thing, article coming out of Blacklisted News. Top British universities found producing fake research. See, what's going on is in the good old days, the rulers would go to the priests and say, priest, here's some money. You tell the people at church that God wants them to do what I want them to do. And that way they would get you to do things like pay more taxes, render unto Caesar, go off on crusades, so forth and so on. Well, people have turned away from religion. And so now the rulers are using scientists. They've gotten rid of the guys in the white robes, and now they've turned to guys in white laboratory coats. And they go to the scientists and say, you tell the people to believe what I want them to believe, and all will be well. And there's a lot of funding involved to prove human-caused global warming. And scientists are not automatically more honorable, ethical people than anybody else just because they're wearing a white laboratory coat. So over here we have these allegations of fake research from some of the UK's top universities, reported between 2011 and 2016, hundreds of allegations including plagiarism and outright fabrication. Science, it's called the golden rule of science. Whoever's got the gold decides the science. I remember one time when I was still involved in advertising, one of the worst commercials I'd ever seen from an ethical point of view was from a candy company who came on out and said they had scientific research showing that eating a candy bar on your lunch break was good nutrition for you. That's how much science can be bought. And they are bought. They're prisoners to that funding. I mean, scientists of a stature of a Robert Ballard, they've got so much funding that they can go where they want to go. Most scientists, just after their postdoc, they'll accept any funding just to stay in research, and with it, the strings that come with it. And we've seen the result. We're going to take a break for commercials, back with the last segment of our program after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, last week we had this tragic story of this girl in high school who was raped by two illegal immigrants who were enrolled in the school. They were actually a little bit older. They were enrolled as freshmen to learn English. Amazingly enough, I mean, of course, it was all over the independent media. The only corporate media outlet to cover it was Fox News. And Bill O'Reilly, I don't always agree with him, but he did come on out and he pointed out Fox News covered this shocking, tragic story. None of the other major corporate news outlets covered it. It's like they feel they're constrained by that German law to not report anything that makes the illegal immigrants and the refugees look bad. And it was quite obvious that these other outlets didn't want to cover it. And now they've upped the ante. CNN host Brian Stelter is attacking Fox News for covering this story of these illegal immigrants who raped this girl in a high school. And he's out there saying it was just local news. It doesn't deserve to be national news. Yeah, it does, actually. Because all across this nation, in every community where the illegal immigrants are pouring on in, parents have a right to know their daughters are now at risk. It's amazing. All right, getting on back to the WikiLeaks dump about CIA documents, they've revealed another program. This one is called Night Skies. The Night Skies tool can hack and remotely control your iPhone without the user knowing. And again, all of this a violation of the 4th Amendment, 5th Amendment, 9th Amendment, 10th Amendment. This is a government that's gone completely rogue. Now, if you are using the Google Nest security cameras, you may want to think about a replacement. Apparently, there is a flaw, or a back door, that allows burglars, or the NSA, to switch these cameras off remotely. There's still a big stink over this law that passed that allow your ISP to sell your browsing data to anybody without your permission. Sell it to the marketing companies, sell it to the government, sell it to the scammers. It's like this idea that privacy? No, you don't have privacy anymore. We own you. You exist so we can make money off of you any way that we can. This idea of privacy, what a ridiculous thing. You have no right to privacy. We do. The elites do. But you serfs, you peones, you Eloi, you farm animals, you have no right to privacy. Of course not. How dare you even think so? What impudence to think that you should have privacy. Apparently, Uber's had to shut down their self-driving cars in Arizona, California, and Pennsylvania. There's been another major crash. The technology just isn't really there. I think a big part of it is the deteriorated conditions of our roads. You can't always see those lines or signs, can you? And these self-driving cars are developed and designed on facilities with roads in good condition. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do the Jim Goddard Show up there in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, please share everything you know with everyone that you know. Go gentle. You're dealing with people trapped and enslaved by beliefs, and you have to be very, very gentle with these poor souls. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.